got to start with a confession that I'm not 100% this week. So I've got tissues, water in case I have a coughing fit. Normally I've got a really high-pitched, shrill voice, but I think I sound quite alluring today. So I'm quite happy about that. Just a little bit of an overview of what I'm going to cover. So I will start with a bit of background about Unipart. I won't go on about it too much, but I think it's important context for our overall wellbeing strategy, and particularly the financial wellbeing element of it, and why we've got particular areas of focus. I'll talk briefly about our history with wellbeing, how we brought our strategy about, and then I'll come on to the actual core elements of our financial wellbeing strategy. So Unipart Group, most people either haven't heard of us or they think we do car parts, which is sort of true. We were originally the parts division of British Leyland. So those of you who remember British Leyland will remember it was a nationalised car manufacturer based in Cowley in Oxfordshire. Dreadful employee relations records, pretty dreadful cars actually from what I can gather. So we were the parts division, and in the mid-80s there was a management buyout led by our current chief executive actually, and we became an independent company. When that buyout took place, I think that the leadership team at that time recognised that things would need to change if Unipart stood any chance of success in the long term. And the basis of that change was to put the customer at the heart of everything we do, and to really put everything into understanding and meeting the needs of customers. And I think the other thing that the leadership team realised at that time was that if we were going to be successful in doing that, we needed to make sure that all of our employees were very focused on the customer and were putting the customer first every day. So that sort of became the basis of our value set and the way that we do business. And actually our approach to our entire workforce is very much predicated on the fact that everyone has a contribution to make. And actually, if you're going to get the best out of everyone in your organisation, you have to accept that all the good ideas are not actually had by a group of people sitting around a board table. And that actually it's those small incremental improvements every single day by every single person in the business, solving problems and thinking about the customer, that will lead to long-term success. So that was kind of 30 years ago, and we've stuck with that. So it's the kind of basis of what we call the Unipart way, our whole approach to employee engagement. So we've diversified, obviously, since doing car parts. So now we've got a number of different divisions. So we've got a logistics division. We still do some logistics in the automotive sector with companies like JLR and Volkswagen. But we also do logistics, for example, for lots of tech companies. So we do phone repairs. If you ring up and order a mobile phone from Vodafone, that will be us. If you send it back to get repaired, that's us. If your Skybox breaks, that's us. We didn't make it break, but we'll fix it. We do all their logistics. We work with Sky on all their recycling, so we've helped them get to zero waste, all sorts of things. So a really, really wide range of customers within our logistics division, and equally we have a rail division. We've got an expert practices, which is kind of like a consultancy business, and we've got international businesses as well that manufacture big heat exchange units over in the States and in the Middle East. So we've got a really wide-ranging and diverse business, and what comes with that is obviously a really wide range and diverse set of employees. We've obviously got a significant number of employees working in distribution centres and manufacturing units who are, unless they're skilled engineers, are going to be towards the lower end of the kind of earnings spectrum. So I think that's quite an important bit of context in terms of our financial strategy. But even in a kind of wider wellbeing sense, there's a lot to think about in terms of the sort of demographics of our workforce. So in terms of actually pulling together our wellbeing strategy, we started off in terms of with a particular approach to employee engagement, which we've probably been working with for about 10 years. So we don't do a big survey every year and then gather it all back in and then announce what everyone says they don't like. We have very few questions in our survey. Teams will do the survey at a local level, and they will go through their results at a local level at a time that works for the team, albeit we expect people to do it every year. We also expect the team to take ownership of problems as well. So it's not okay to just come up with a list of gripes and then push it up the line. What we expect is, the ones that you can fix yourself, fix them. The ones you can't fix, then you escalate. And to give you an example, the first year we did it, literally everyone had a massive whinge about the IT systems and said it was the biggest hindrance to them doing their best work every day. That did end up being escalated to board level, and consequently massive changes were made. So that's the kind of approach that we take to employee engagement. What we realised after doing that for a while was that we were missing a piece in terms of employee engagement, because we were missing the wellbeing bit in terms of a strategic approach. So I was tasked with devising a wellbeing strategy in my capacity as HR director for CR. And I spent vast amounts of time trying to think of something innovative that would kind of encapsulate our strategy. Because at Unipart, we do like anything that's shaped like a U or anything in the shape of a pyramid. Those are our favourite shapes. But I couldn't think of anything. But I was doing a lot of work with BITC, as we've done for a long time. And actually, BITC were in the stage of launching the Work Well model. So actually, it's finally dawned on me that I was just trying to reinvent something that there was already a really sort of top-class model out there that we could just use. So that's what we did. And actually, our kind of starting point with that was to take that model and look at each component part of it and think about, we did a gap analysis to think about what are we already doing and doing really well, and what are we not so strong on or haven't got anything at all. So we used that as the basis of our strategy. And actually, our strategy is really simple. The simplest bit was thinking of the name, which I just blatantly copied and called it Unipart Work Well, because you might as well just acknowledge that you've copied someone else's work. But actually, we're really proud to be associated with that model, because we do think it's best in class. And actually, the basis of the strategy is really, really simple. And it goes back to this concept of people taking responsibility, people solving problems at their own level. It's not my job to make everyone stop smoking or lose weight. People need to take responsibility for that. But what we can do as an organisation is provide information and support and training, particularly for line managers, who are absolutely key. They're key to levels of everyday engagement. They're the single biggest influencer of engagement on a day-to-day level. But equally, they've got a really important role to play with wellbeing, and in particular in terms of sort of mental health. And then, of course, from a kind of health and safety perspective, there are going to be workplace factors that could be negatively impacting people's well-being. So that's an important element of our strategy. I think sometimes the challenge with well-being is there's so much stuff out there, and it's potentially so complicated because you're dealing with really complicated issues. And actually, I'm not an expert in well-being, and there's so many different elements to it. Even if I thought I was, which I don't, you couldn't possibly be an expert in every single component part of a well-being strategy. I think the other danger is that depending on what your situation is, there's a danger of coming across as, quite frankly, a bit patronising and smug. And you can scare people with it. If your wellbeing strategy is really complicated, I think people either get scared or actually, potentially quite bored if you keep kind of going on about the same stuff. So it's a really simple strategy. We've got it all over our walls. The logo kind of works because it addresses the different elements of wellbeing that we're focused on and that link back to the model. So there's a logo, that little man holding up the world. It symbolises kind of good work, which is all encompassed in the Unipart way. The emergency sign is obviously, it's about safety and safe working practices. We've got a piggy bank, so we did acknowledge from the outset that there's something about financial well-being here that we need to think about. And then the heart is obviously about kind of emotional and physical well-being. So we felt we'd captured it all. And based on the gap analysis, we knew that we had a really strong track record in some areas. So safe work and safe working practices, we were all over that and we were really good at it. It's not perfect, obviously, but, we're strong. We also felt we were very strong in employee engagement and team working. But other areas were much more we had much more weakness in. And if we think back to the model, there was an area of that called better specialist support, and we were not strong there at all. And some of that was easy to fill, so it was fairly straightforward to engage with an employee assistance provider. So we had a helpline, we had counselling available, there was training support through them, there was a website with loads of info on it. They did do stuff on financial wellbeing, specifically around debt support. So I felt kind of the piggy bank was sort of being covered. Our other areas were much more tricky, things like mental health training, and you know, we're still trying to work on that and improve what we do in that area. So the strategy's been ongoing for a long time. Last year, you know, we really decided that we needed to do more on the financial wellbeing element. I think there was a lot of stuff in the press about the link between mental health and financial problems. I think we're all aware and very cognizant of the traps that people can fall into, particularly at the lower end of the earnings bracket in terms of payday lenders and, you know, unscrupulous financial deals. And I think sometimes people didn't actually fully understand things like what an interest rate is. And that's not because they're stupid, but actually if you haven't been told, how do you know? So actually our financial wellbeing strategy is really simple. And the approach I took was to, you know, because I'm not an expert, was to seek expertise and just partner with some carefully selected organisations. So we already had our employee assistance provider, but their main focus was working with people on kind of people in serious debt. It was difficult to triage people through to that because nobody wants to talk about at work the fact that, you know, they're having financial problems. It's really embarrassing. Actually, no one's going to share that with their line manager unless you're asking for a pay rise. But it's a really difficult subject. So what we wanted to do with our financial wellbeing strategy was have a kind of holistic approach. So we wanted really to focus on the education piece, because I think if people are better informed about money and finances and steps and sensible things that they can do, it helps them make better decisions. We wanted to encourage people to save. We wanted to give people access to ethical and low-cost loans. And we also wanted to continue with that element of debt support. And that's what we've been doing through the partners that we've got. So we've got our EAP, and we're obviously working closely with Salary Finance. I feel a bit of a fraud because actually we've only been working with Salary Finance since late last year, but it's been, it's been a huge success. It was actually incredibly easy to implement because we sort of dawdled around for months trying to decide whether we were going to do it or not, and it kept getting picked up and put down. And then suddenly in October, we just decided we wanted it in before Christmas, and I turned into a bit of an old witch, to be fair, making everyone do stuff to make sure we could get it in. But it's been a really big success, and just to give you an idea of some of the sort of impact it's had amongst our workforce. I mean, we've had an EAP now for our 4th year, and I think we've got about 5% usage in terms of the people that call, despite the fact I'm constantly banging on about it. With Salary Finance, we've had 16% of our colleagues already have accessed the website to look at education and the different modules on the website, which I think is just an incredible statistic in 3 months. 5% of our colleagues have applied for loans, which I think is really, really quite revealing, actually, in terms of the sort of need that was out there that was clearly not being met. And actually the acceptance rate for loans compared to kind of high street acceptance rates, which I think is about 20%, is currently 70%. And those that aren't accepted for loans, and this was something that was really important to us actually when we were talking to Salary Finance, was to make sure that if somebody was not accepted for a loan, that they weren't just left dangling. So we made sure that they're triaged either through to the third parties that Salary Finance work with or our own EAP provider to talk about, if actually they're in financial distress, how they can be supported to get out of that. We've currently only got 9 people who've submitted for savings accounts. And for me, that's going to be one of our key kind of measures of success, is going to be to see that number grow. At the minute, it looks like the real impact is helping to get people out of debt and save them money in terms of interest payments. I think the average saving per colleague is about £600. which is a lot of money in anyone's book, but actually if you're at the low end of the earnings spectrum, that's, you know, that is a really significant amount of money to be saving on interest payments. So I think for me, one of our key measures of success is going to be seeing that loan number, the savings number increase. So the other thing we're doing, just to kind of finish that off in terms of the other elements of our financial wellbeing approach, is kind of lunch and learn sessions, so to kind of localised training sessions to kind of raise awareness on particular issues. And again, it's back to helping people make better decisions. So we've started those at our head office as a bit of a pilot to see how they go. So the first one was on financial awareness for women, which is all about that kind of appalling savings gap that we hit at 65, where we discover we've got an appalling pension pot and our husband has just left us. So it was all about that, and actually, you know, the steps that we can take as women to put ourselves in a stronger position, not just if your husband leaves you, but just generally. And then the next one is actually on wills and inheritance. I'm not going to lie, that's because we decided our wills were out of date, me and my husband. So we've updated them and realised that there's all this stuff we didn't know. So I've wheeled in the person that helped us do our will. And she's going to do a session for everyone on wills and inheritance. But actually, nonetheless, sometimes thinking about issues you're going through in your own life can help steer kind of, because we didn't know, and I think we're a reasonably intelligent couple, chances are other people haven't got themselves well established either. So I'm actually, again, really popular. So I think about 50 people have already booked on. So we won't be having the posh buffet for this one. It's going to be sandwiches. So that kind of rounds off the kind of whole story around our financial wellbeing strategy. It is in its infancy. It's only March, and we kind of kicked it off at the beginning of December, but the feedback so far has been really, really strong from our workforce. We're continuing with the kind of messaging out there. You know, I think my strategy generally with wellbeing is let's try and do a few things and do them really well, rather than just go berserk and start hurling stuff at people and confusing them and maybe not doing it quite so effectively. So it's maybe not as all-encompassing as it could be, but I think it's a reasonable start, and I'm really pleased with the partners that we've selected. I think that's it for me.